Hi guys, not Genie here. Welcome to my channel. This is my first time doing a voiceover content on YouTube, and if this is your first time here, thank you for stopping by. Now let us begin today's topic. In this video, we're gonna talk about the Queen of Nuke, Eula. But first, let us find out what Tectone has to say about her.
The best thing about Eula, in my opinion, is when you go to your attack 4, if you look at her ass, her butt cheeks jiggle. It's very important, man.
Just kidding. As I look into the Genshin community from a CN version, most of the players don't encourage pulling for a Constellation 0 Eula, and a huge part of them are saying Eula's potential are locked behind constellations, and the gap between a free-to-play and a whale is just too big. As we all know, Eula has an absolutely high multiplier from her kit, and that's one of the main reasons why players concentrate on that one big damage per screenshot just from her elemental burst. And time to time we hear players saying that they accept the fact that a C6 Eula does 10 times more damage than their own C0 Eula. But in reality, even if it's just 3 times more damage than a regular Constellation 0 Eula, they already see it as totally unplayable at that point. So you might be asking, are the upgrades from her constellations really that huge of a deal? Let's dive deeper into her constellations. Well, the impression that players perceived was a Constellation 6 Eula with a Refinement 5 Songs of Broken Pines can deal 3 times the damage of a Constellation 0 Eula with a 4-star weapon, meaning that a free-to-play Eula's burst deals around 200,000 while the whale's burst deals around 600 to 700,000. And this has heavily branded Eula as not as free-to-play friendly, but is that really it? Well, technically it's not really entirely true, because Eula's normal attack does not increase drastically even with high constellations. A free-to-play player's normal attack damage is not that far apart from the whale's Eula's normal attack damage. The damage difference is actually very minimal. A lot of players think a C6 Eula doesn't do normal attacks that much, but realistically speaking that is not true. It's really situational. A C0 Eula standing in Bennett's elemental burst can hit 20 to 30,000 auto attack damage easily, even without a signature weapon. Also, Eula's constellation doesn't really add on to her basic attack damage multiplier, except Constellation 1. Constellation 1 gives a 30% physical damage bonus, but due to the fact that it's an add-on bonus damage, it will have diminishing return. So practically speaking, it's less than 15% damage bonus in total. In the grand scheme of things, a C6 Eula with refined Song of Broken Pines, the normal attack damage she deals is only around 20% higher than a free-to-play Eula. Now to the elemental burst, where most players concern more. With Constellation 6 Eula, it's indeed true that her potential will skyrocket. But in general combat, Eula is not a character that just go EQE and be done. In the recent Genshin updates, most of the enemies in Spiral Abyss have tons of HP. If Eula goes EQE and still not finishing the enemies, it's not really worth it, as the downtime is really long due to a high energy cost burst. For example, like the new Inazuma monsters, the elite version of the Rift Hounds, they have like a freaking million HP, and most of the time they would come in waves. So the ideal scenario for Eula would be by the time she stacked her buffs and then burst down the elite monsters, swap her out and let Raiden or any of your sub DPS to clean out the rest of the easier enemy. So in general, a C6 Eula is roughly 2.5 times stronger than a C0 Eula. And ultimately, in almost everywhere else, a C6 Eula with R5 Broken Pines usually kill the enemies with just EQE rotation. But now, we can't really guarantee it since the HP of the enemies in Spiral Abyss are getting bigger HP and it might not be 100% practical already. We can also take a look at the C0 Ayaka with and without Mist Splitter. The difference of damage output is really huge. Damage output difference between an Ayaka using a prototype sword rather than Mist Splitter is bigger than Ganyu using prototype bow rather than Amos bow. Eula's constellation does increase her potential by a huge amount, But the low constellation Eula's damage output is definitely rock solid as well for all the content Genshin have to offer. So what is the actual problem that caused the low usage of Eula's in the current Spiral Abyss lately? In CN it's less than 30%, and even Child Tartaglia has a higher pick rate than her apparently. However, this case doesn't apply to the global Genshin environment because the Spiral Abyss pick rate in global is almost 2 times higher than the CN side. The actual reason is that the players that took part in the stat surveys are the competitive players that treat Spiral Abyss as a form of PvP, and the player base is brainwashed by the statistic to the extent that they thought Eula wasn't even worth using in Spiral Abyss and naturally replacing her with other speedrunning team comps, and that doesn't mean she's bad at all. In fact, she's far from being bad and unusable. So it's really better to just take the stats as reference, as the character pick rates are eventually gonna be affected each time Genshin decided to release a new meta character. I mean, take a look at Kazuha. What also affects players' impression for Eula is the team comp. Eula is kinda picky when it comes to team comp. She's bound with Electro teammates for superconduct, and Raiden is naturally her best pick up to date. The only thing that keeps the C0 and C6 Eula's gap close is her normal attack, because for C6 Eula, most of her damage comes from her burst. And remember to keep Bennett's constellation at C5 if you plan to pair him up with Eula, specifically non-C6 Eula. Another downside of Eula is that her elemental burst AoE is really small, so it takes some time and effort to figure out what position to be in and when to pop the elemental burst in order to save DPS loss in Spiral Abyss. One interesting point is that according to some of the endgame Spiral Abyss enthusiasts in the CN community, a C0 Eula for them is arguably better than a C0 Hu Tao if players manage to grasp the timing of using her kit. Collectively speaking, it's not really the case that a C0 Eula is weak or even unplayable. It's just a matter of preference nowadays since we have so many comps like Morgana, Taser Comp, National Team, Perma Freeze. We even have new potential dual comps that are coming soon. A C0 Eula ceiling is actually much more higher than most of the other characters, but at the same time, her floor limitation is lower as well. I've seen one comment coming from an F2P Eula player. He says, out of all of this Constellation 0 5-star DPS, Eula actually have the highest and the most stable DPS. The only challenging part is that players need to know where do they need to be after 7 seconds when they pop the elemental burst. She's also a character that can get away with low investment while getting high returns. She's more than just decent for F2P players. While I was making this video, MiHoYo released information about 2 new upcoming characters that are coming in patch 2.4, which is Shen He, a cryo poem character, and the other one, Yunjing. Unfortunately, she's not an anime character, but this doesn't mean that Shell's rerun isn't coming soon. And that concludes today's video. Thank you for stopping by, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, as that will support me to continue making more Genshin content in the future. See you next time. Peace.